The United States holds its midterm elections as Republicans and Democrats push for control of the Senate and the House. Also in Nicaragua, the Sandinista National Liberation Front won 153 mayor offices in the country at municipal elections held this past Sunday. High-level meetings between heads of state and governments continued on Tuesday in Sharm el-Sheikh within the framework of the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Despite sanctions imposed by the United States against Russia, the Treasury and State Departments have urged banking giants, including JP Morgan and Citigroup, to keep doing business with certain strategic Russian companies. The quiet effort is part of Joe Biden's administration's push to minimize the adverse effects of sanctions. In particular, government officials urge banks not to refuse to provide basic services, like money transfers and conversion into dollars, to companies that are not directly under sanctions, such as Gazprom, Ularki, and Fosargo. The United States holds on Tuesday its midterm elections. The outcome will have a major impact on the remaining 2 years of Joe Biden's presidency and beyond. More than 44 million voters casted early ballots in these midterm elections that will determine control of the House and Senate. Democrats are trying to cling to their majorities in Congress for the final 2 years of President Biden's first term. Meanwhile, Republicans are favored to win control of the House, while the race for Senate control appears tight. Whatever happens in the midterm elections will have just as big an impact on the direction of the country, because whoever controls the House of the Senate controls the agenda of the nation. And as the U.S. midterm elections rolls out, the eyes of the world are on the possible outcome: Republican control in Congress or an endorsement to President Joe Biden's administration. To discuss on the topic, we invite activist Jamir Shabur, who also is a media analyst. We welcome Jamir.
Thank you for having me on TeleSUR English. It's a pleasure to be here, guys.
So, Jamir, as you are a media analyst, let's focus on your area of expertise. This morning, The Hill reported that President Joe Biden's approval dropped from 40% to 39%. That's just a percentage point, but the media narrative behind it is that Biden is losing the confidence of the U.S. citizens. So how the media shaped the narrative of a possible power shift in these elections?
Well, yes. Throughout these elections, throughout this campaign for this midterm election that we're going through, there has been promotion through the mainstream media of the Republicans having a strong campaign, of ex-President Donald Trump with his Save America campaign, and the rhetoric of a lot of his supporters that they believed that the Democrats and Joe Biden stole the elections from Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump is truly their president, and as well as they're riding the wave of their January 6th assault on the Capitol. So there has been a strong campaign, and very ironically, a lot of these folks that are like very far right, very populist, have taken the populist message, and that's reflective on the capitalist economy and the crisis that we're going through when it comes to inflation of gas prices and oil, which is also a reflection on the war that's happening in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, which is funded by Joe Biden's administration and which was propagated by Biden's administration. So as we see, there's a very high chance that a lot of Trump and his supporters might be victorious in these elections, in these midterm elections, which would create a different balance in power within the U.S. Congress, the House, and the Senate.
Yes, so talking about other media, not only the major outlets, also, social media. Yesterday, Elon Musk, who not only runs space technology and the industries, but also just bought Twitter, said he backs Republicans, he endorses the Republicans in these elections. So how social media and the big consortiums come to play in these elections?
Well, social media plays a big part in these elections just because of the world we live in now, where mostly people absorb their news through social media, through Instagram, through Facebook, and especially Twitter, which ex-President Donald Trump was the most used. He was the most known as a U.S. president to use Twitter and to promote his messages to his followers to the point where he got censored. But as we see right now, there has been massive campaigning on the Trumpers, the Republicans, the far right, through these social media platforms, in order to create this narrative of them talking about that they need to save America from the Democrats, because the Democrats are enabling all this insecurity, all this criminality that's happening, and they're allowing undocumented immigrants to flock the U.S. borders, and I'm just speaking in their context, that basically how you had massive waves of immigrants, and you had these Republican governors in Texas and especially in Florida, Ron DeSantis, that threw all these immigrants that came from Venezuela, Haiti, Colombia, Central America on buses to northern democratic states like New York. As a way of protesting Joe Biden's government. So yes, the social media has played a big role in kind of having the right wing take over and occupy the popular message.
So thank you, Yamir, for your time here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's always a pleasure. We were speaking to Yamir Shabur, activist and media analyst. We'll go to a short break now. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Nicaragua, the Sandinista National Liberation Front won 153 mayor offices in the country at municipal elections held this past Sunday. Nicaragua's Supreme Electoral Council announced on Monday that the Sandinista National Liberation Front got 73.70% of the votes in municipal elections. According to the Electoral Council, more than 1,489,000 people voted in favor of the ruling party, while the opposing Liberal Constitutionalist Party got 256,000 votes for a 12.64%. Electoral Council President Brenda Rocha congratulated the citizenry for participating in Sunday's election in an orderly fashion. Bolivia's President Luis Arce will present his administration report before the Legislative Assembly on Tuesday, 2 years after his inauguration. On early Tuesday, there was a parade by social organizations held at the Murillo Square, which is a symbol of the government and legislative capital of the plurinational state, and later was held an ancestral ceremony. The Bolivian president will go to the side of parliament to report before deputies and senators about his administration's performance in national economy, social indicators, and other achievements of his administration, which have been acknowledged by international organizations. Regarding this topic, the Bolivian head of state took to Twitter and announced, "We completed 2 years of management in which, thanks to the unity work, effort, and commitment of the Bolivian people, we recovered the right to education, health, and return to the path of economic growth, which is already the heritage of the Bolivians and the people." And in the second tweet, President Arce said, "We have no doubt that we will reach out bicentennial which consolidated economic, political, social, health, educational, and cultural stability, because we are moved by the greatest feeling of love for our homeland. 2 years of achievements, and we continue." In Ecuador, a new prison riot in Quito left at least 5 dead and 3 injured, while this Tuesday authorities recorded new explosive attacks in north of Guayaquil. Quito Police Commander General Victor Herrera stated that the event took place inside the Pichincha No. 1 prison after confrontations between rival gangs. Authorities also added that various security agencies were deployed to the scene and managed to resume control of the prison. The Guayaquil police also reported that a car was destroyed after 2 people on a motorcycle set it on fire and fled. As a result of these violent events, the National Assembly approved a 30-day deadline for the President, Guillermo Lasso, to solve the situation. We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. High-level meetings between heads of state and government continued on Tuesday in Sharm el-Sheikh, within the framework of the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt. Outstanding debts with developing countries will be the focus of the debates. A year ago, rich nations agreed to transfer $100 billion a year to developing countries. The money was never allocated, and in the few cases it did, it was granted as a loan. The attitude of the major world powers has been harshly criticized at the beginning of the COP27 and in previous events. During the second day of debates, issues like the war crisis, inflation, and the pandemic will be at the center. Statements by the leaders of the Amazon countries are of particular interest. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros singled out developed countries for their capitalism, telling the United Nations Climate Conference their exploitation of the planet's resources was the cause of the climate crisis.
Human civilization is responsible for this serious affectation that the planet is experiencing today. However, this statement is incomplete, and it will be hypocritical if it is not detailed that this civilization is profoundly unequal. It is made up of countries that have been indiscriminately exploiting the natural resource of the planet, while others barely have enough to feed themselves and persist on the pre-industrial mode of production. This is inequality. Venezuela is responsible for less than 0.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions of the planet. However, the Venezuelan people must pay the consequence of an imbalance caused by the main capitalist economies of the world, who have polluted and continue to pollute the planet for the benefit of a few. There is a correlation between the environmental crisis and the crisis of inequality that generates poverty in the world. The indiscriminate exploitation of renewable and non-renewable resources, in addition to producing environmental misery, is responsible for social misery on a planetary scale, which is also sharpening. This cannot be ignored at the moment of drawing up drastic measures and effective plans that enormously correct the activity of civilizations for the future.
Addressing the United Nations Climate Change Conference, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brownie, harshly criticized fossil fuel companies making extortionate profits at the expense of human civilization and called for a global carbon tax to help fund poorer nations fighting climate change.
6 fossil fuel companies, and I emphasize 6, made more than enough money to cover the costs of major climate damages in developing countries with nearly $70 billion in profits. It is about time that these companies are made to pay a global carbon tax on their profits as a source of funding for loss and damage. Profligate producers of fossil fuels have benefited from extortionate profits at the expense of human civilization. While they are profiting, the planet is burning. We need urgent collective action to reduce emissions and to end fossil fuel subsidies, the proceeds of which should be redirected and used to fund adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage, especially in small island developing states. Financing to address loss and damage, and a recommitment to keeping 1.5 alive in the face of the current energy crisis are the key critical success factors of COP27 with the climate system.
Now we move on to other topics. A German ship disembarked all 89 people rescued from the Mediterranean in a southern Italian port on Tuesday, 2 days after Rome blocked other landings in Sicily. The ship Rise Above docked in Reggio Calabria after days of waiting, as the delay in being assigned a port had taken its toll. Originally, there were 95 people on board, but 6 were taken off as medical emergencies. The remainder were suffering from sea sickness and exhaustion. Italy's new government, led by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, has vowed to stop the tens of thousands of people who land on its shores every year. Over the weekend, some 500 asylum seekers rescued by 2 charity ships were allowed to disembark in the Sicilian port of Catania, but around 250 others were refused.
Evaluating the people's condition, we'll see, according to their criteria, how many can get off the ship, and we continue to push for all of them to disembark. Of course, the thing we are not able to deal with is the uncertainty. We don't have any information for giving an estimate orientation on what will happen. And no one can deal with this at any level. They can feel it, and their anxiety grows every day.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.